This time of the year when we begin to have pretty days and seems like winter's gone, even though I know it's not. This is just February, but we've had a little taste, I guess you would say, of spring of the year this week. Had several pretty days in a row with no rain, which is amazing. We've had so much rain, but these beautiful days have made me want to get out and plant, even though I know it's too early. I know old man winter will be back. He's not gone for good yet. But when you think about planting in Appalachia, a lot of times one of the subjects that comes up often is planting by the signs. Well, if you've never heard of planting by the signs, that means that you use the zodiac signs as a guide as to when you should plant your crops. Now, I did not grow up in a house where planting by the signs was something that we didn't do that. Pap had a garden every year, but he had a full-time job. He was a Sunday school teacher. He was part of the Wilson Brothers, so he was constantly traveling around playing music places. He also coached baseball. So between all that, I guess it wasn't necessarily that he didn't believe in the signs. It was just that when it was good weather and he had time, then he had to plant the garden. That was just how he looked at it. Now, Granny and Pap did follow the signs when it come to making kraut and those kind of things. That's a whole different subject. But anyway, so I was not someone that grew up in a home where planting by the signs was common. Now, my whole life I've heard people say, well, if you were going to take the baby's pacifier, you need to do it in the right sign. It would take better. If you were going to get your hair cut, I know one of my friends, she would get her daughter's hair cut under the right sign when she was a real little girl so that her hair would grow thicker, it would grow longer. So those are all things that were common in my life. I just didn't grow up with the planting by the sign necessarily. But after I was married and I started planting my own garden, that's a subject that I become greatly interested in. So once I decided I was interested in planting by the signs and that I wanted to try it, I really began reading about it and studying on it, and I began asking other people in my community about if they planted by the signs. Well, I quickly discovered there was two schools of thought. One was that it was total hogwash and there was no need to worry about it, and the other was people that firmly believed that the signs really could help your garden grow better, that you would have more production, you'd have a better harvest, and they said they knew it was to be true because it had been passed down in their family. Their grandparents did it, their parents did it, and they did it. So immediately as I talked to these people, my mind as a believer, I went to two different Bible verses. One in Genesis that talks about the firmament and the lights and that it should be used for signs, and then one in Ecclesiastes that talks about there being a time for everything, including when to plant. So with those things in my mind, I thought, well, I really want to try this. Well, an older lady in my community, she told me that her family had always observed planting by the signs, and that really, it was in a nutshell, she said it's not that hard. Her family, the way they did it, was that they planted under the sign of the crab. Well, every zodiac has a corresponding body part and a corresponding symbol and a element of earth. I'll go over that a little bit better in a moment. But anyway, so her family, that's what they called it. They planted under the crab. It's really the Cancer sign, but the crab is what the symbol for Cancer is. Anyway, so she told me that, so that first year, that's what I did. I planted everything, tried to make sure I planted it all under the sign of under the crab, like she called it. So, well, my garden seemed to do better. It seemed to produce better. So I was all excited. So by the next year, I thought, well, I'm really going to dig in deep and I'm really going to figure this out. And I'm going to do everything just like what I've read. Well, when you start studying planting by the signs, you'll soon read about the increasing and the decreasing of the moon, or the waxing and the waning of the moon, like building up to a full moon and then going back down on the other side. So that plays a huge role in it. That along with the signs, which the zodiac signs that are fruitful. So that year, I about drove myself crazy. It was like I was playing a mean game of Mother May I, I just worried so much about the garden. And the garden did produce. It produced really good. But I drove myself crazy with it. And although the garden produced, I did not enjoy my garden that year because I was just worrying too much about planting by the signs exactly right, because I just wanted it to be perfect, Well, by the next year, I had a total change of heart, and I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to find out a really easy way to do it. Because like Pap, I work a full-time job. I do the Blind Pig and the Acorn. I play music with the girls all over the place. And even just the garden, that's a huge responsibility when you think about planting it and taking care of it and then harvesting everything. So I have a busy life too, just like Pap did. So that left me to decide that I needed a really simple way if I was going to plant by the signs. So I decided, I thought back to that first year when it seemed to work so well, and I was only focusing on the under the crab part, and I thought I need to do something simple like that. Well, the only problem with under the crab part is that the sign is only in that sign like 2 to 3 days a month. Well, you have a whole month. What if it rains on those days? So that's not going to work. Then you can't just wait the whole month of May and not plant anything if you happen to have a really rainy May, on the days that you want to plant. So I decided I would pick 4 zodiac signs that were fruitful, and those are the ones I would plant under. And then I wouldn't worry about the waxing or the waning of the moon. I would just focus on those fruitful signs, and I'd see what happened. Well, all these years later, I'm still planting under those fruitful signs. The ones that I use are Taurus, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Now, Taurus is supposed to be especially good for all root crops and above ground crops. Cancer is the best one. I still think the little old lady was right. Under the crab, that was the best one for everything. Scorpio, best for flowers and above ground crops. Pisces, good for planting and transplanting above ground crops, trees, and shrubbery. So those are the ones that I chose to plant under, and that's what we've followed all these years. Each month on the Blind Pig and the Acorn during the summer, I give a little calendar that shows which days the ones that I like, those signs, what they fall on. Like I said, there's so many different opinions. When it comes to planting by the signs, you'll find somebody else that probably says I'm doing it wrong. But this is the way that I like to do it, and what's worked well for us. So if you're looking for a calendar that has those, the great place in my area to get it is either like a bank or a funeral home sometimes gives them out, and it's a planting calendar is what it's called, a planting calendar. So it'll have the zodiac signs, it'll have a lot of other information too, more than that, but it'll have all those corresponding, like the symbol and the part of the body, it will have all that. So it's helpful when you're planting, but it's also helpful like if you do want to follow the signs when you're deciding that you're going to ferment or make kraut, make pickled beans and corn, that kind of thing. If you've never heard of the Foxfire books and you like Appalachia, you should definitely check them out. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out their great website. So one of the Foxfire books, the oldest one that I have all of them pretty much, but this one, the Foxfire book, I actually got it when I was in college in the Appalachian Studies class, so I've had it for a long time, but it has a great little chapter in it about planting by the signs, and I'm going to read you a little bit of that now. So kind of explain that I was talking about a minute ago, the symbol and the element and then the sign. So every day of the month is dominated by one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Each of the 12 appears at least once a month, and then for a period of either 2 or 3 days. All good planning calendars label each day with the sign that rules over it, depending on which constellation is foremost in the sky at the time. The part of the body and the planet associated with the sign and the element it is most closely akin to. The following chart summarizes this information. I'm not going to read you the whole chart, but I will read the one that, since we were talking about the crab. So for example, for that one, it's Cancer, and then the symbol is crab, and then the body part is breast, stomach, and then the planet is moon, and then the element is water. So, and then each zodiac sign has those things that correlate with it. So it says the signs always appear in sequence, beginning with the ram or head and working their way down to Pisces, the fish or feet. Working their way down to Pisces, the fish or feet. Following Pisces, the ram appears again, and it just starts a new sequence over and over. Each of the signs is known as being either masculine, feminine, airy, dry, barren, fiery, earthy, moist, watery, fruitful, or very fruitful. In general, any activity that requires a dry atmosphere, such as painting, should be done on one of the dry signs, and an activity requiring moisture, such as some planting, should be done on one of the most moist or fruitful signs. The best time of all, of course, to conduct any activity is when a day falls on both an ideal sign and a good phase of the moon. That's talking about the waxing and the waning of the moon, which, as I've told you, that I do not worry about, but lots of people who follow the signs do, and they swear by it, so you should definitely check that out if you're interested. Then they have some rules down here that are interesting. So it says the following rules were gathered both from interviews and wide reading. They do not represent a complete set, but they should serve to give the reader a good idea as to the nature of this system. We also included rules for butchering, cutting hair, killing weeds, pulling teeth, and others to give some grasp of the scope of the subject. So, see, even the Foxfire book is saying, once you start talking to people, there's so many variations and so many different thoughts on planting by the signs or doing anything by the signs. So this is planting. Planting is best done in the fruitful signs of Scorpio, Pisces, Taurus, or Cancer, when the signs are in the loins, feet, neck, or breast. Plow, till, and cultivate in Aries. Never plant anything in one of the barren signs. They are good only for trimming, deadening, and destroying. Always set plants out in a water or earth sign. Graft just before the sap starts to flow while the moon is in its first or second quarter and while it is passing through a fruitful watery sign or Capricorn. Never graft or plant on Sunday, as this is a barren hot day, the sun's day. Plant flowers in, Plant them while the moon is in the first quarter, unless you need the seeds, in which case use the period between the moon's second quarter and full. Corn planted in Leo will have a hard, round stalk and small ears. Crops planted in Taurus and Cancer will stand drought. Plant beans when the signs are in the arms. Root flower cuttings, limbs, vines, and set out flower bushes and trees in December and January when the signs are in the knees and feet. Never transplant in the heart or head, as both these signs are death signs. If you want a large vine and stalk with little fruit, plant in Virgo, bloom days. Don't plant potatoes in the feet. If you do, they will develop little nubs like toes all over the main potato. The best time is a dark night in March. Plant all things which yield above the ground during the increase or growing of the moon, and all things which yield below the ground, root crops, when the moon is decreasing or darkening. Never plant on the first day of the new moon or on a day when the moon changes quarters. In the fourth quarter, turn sod, pull weeds, and destroy. So you can see lots of information there. I was going to read you some of those. Just these are some other ones that are not planting by the signs but are going by the signs, just interesting ones. So wean a child or an animal when the moon is in a sign that does not rule the vital parts of the body. So Capricorn, Pisces, or Sagittarius. Set eggs to hatch in a fruitful sign like Cancer. Quit habits on the second day that the moon is in Sagittarius or on the new moon or in Pisces. If you cut your hair in Sagittarius, Aquarius, or Pisces, it will grow stronger, thicker, and more beautiful. Purge with peels in Pisces and with liquids in Sagittarius. Bake and cook in Aries. Hunt in Taurus. Lay foundations in Capricorn. You can see it just goes on and on and on. People that the signs, that they really look to the signs to indicate what they need to do in every area of their life. So, as I said before, it's just interesting to think about. And it's interesting, go back to the very beginning when I was talking about how there's two schools of thought, whether it's hogwash or whether it really means something, whether it really works. So over the years, I've thought about that a lot, and thought, well, for one thing, there's a lot more fruitful signs than you think there is. So, I've thought, well, maybe people like Pat, maybe he just happened to plant on a fruitful sign every time, because there is more fruitful signs than just one or two. So that's one thing that's interesting to think about. But then the other thing, I think, if it is total hogwash, another reason that it could still work, even if it's hogwash, is that it helps you be so much more organized. So during these spring months, when I start thinking about, and we'll start planting outside in March, probably like spring vegetables, I start thinking ahead. So it makes me get the calendar down, and it makes me look and see what fruitful days are going to be in March, what fruitful days are going to be in April, what am I going to do in May. So it kind of makes me think ahead, and because I think ahead, I'm more organized. I know that I have my seed that I need. I know that the garden bed is prepared. I know that if I'm going to put compost, that I've already got my compost ready. I know to block out that period of time that it's going to take to actually plant the garden. Well, if you do all those things, it forces you to be more organized, and with most things in life, a lot of times organization helps us out, to plan ahead. So that's another way that even for people that don't necessarily believe in planting by the signs, I say, well, it'll help you be more organized, and then you'll probably have a better garden just because you're more organized. I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me, are you familiar with planting by the signs? Did you grow up in a family that observed that ritual every year, every spring when it come around to planting time? Or do you think it's hogwash? You can tell me that too. But mostly I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.